You're listening to IBNX. IBNXradio.com.
I'm Dr. Harrison Davis.
And I'm Dr. Asha Dickerson.
And you're listening to Two Therapists and a Microphone. Hello and welcome to Two Therapists and a Microphone. I am Dr. Harrison Davis.
And I'm Dr. Asha Dickerson.
And today we're going to talk about sports, athletes, and some of the things that they have to go through to maintain their performance and anything that it may cost them, what they may be compromising to remain in the athletic world.
So this is a subject that is very interesting to me because I have a young athlete, and with everything I do with my children, I'm always thinking, I don't want to create anything that they end up having to talk about in therapy later on in life.
That's a good policy.
Yeah, try to, therapy
Can't blame
is good,
you.
but I don't want them to have mommy issues, and they talk about that all through therapy. But we see a lot of the young athletes out, and Harrison and I were talking about in the heat, in the gym.
Yeah, it's hot right now in Georgia.
Sports may be their entire life. They have these goals. And I saw a meme on Facebook maybe 2 days ago. It was from a principal at a school that said a lot of people put their kids in sports with the goal of them getting college scholarships, but that's not what sports are about. It's about, I don't know what she was saying, team building or something. Once she said it wasn't about
what is
scholarships,
it about?
I stopped.
I don't
right.
know.
Once she said it wasn't about scholarships and going to college, I stopped paying attention. But
that's apparent.
But we had a guest who was going to be here, but unfortunately, it is fortunate that he has to start training for his sport. We had Malcolm Hayes, who was coming on. He plays for the Gladiators, which is a hockey team in Gwinnett County, which I'm going to go watch them now because the last time I went to see the Gladiators, I did not see one black person out there playing hockey.
I did not know there were any black hockey players.
But apparently Malcolm Hayes might be the only black person out there playing hockey, so I'm going to go watch it.
Okay.
But Malcolm was not able to be here, but he has spoken about his issues and his struggling with mental health. So, Trish, if you will, please, we're going to listen to a clip from the video that he posted on his social media.
I wanted to talk about a more serious topic pertaining to mental health, specifically depression and anxiety. I myself am somebody who struggles with depression and anxiety, and I feel like this could be talked a lot more, especially for college athletes. It's making waves through the NBA. The person who inspired me to kind of speak up about this was Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan. And I just feel like this needs to be a more talked about topic because it's a serious illness that people struggle with, not just athletes, but everybody struggles with it. And we all go through it on a daily basis, some worse than others. And my goal with sharing this video is to inspire at least one person to speak up to, whether it's their mom, dad, brother, sister, teammate, coach, whatever it is, maybe even go see a therapist, whatever they need to do to go get help so they don't have to suffer through things that I went through or even worse things that other people have gone through. Depression and anxiety affects a lot of people. Having anxiety is frustrating because it's the most silent but painful experience that you can have. And then when you add the depression to it, it's that feeling of not doing enough, but also not having the energy to do anything, and you feel trapped sometimes or stuck, like you don't know what to do about it. And that was like one of the worst things for me because I have that upbeat personality of always wanting to do something, always wanting to get something done and kind of be successful. So when I feel like I'm not doing enough and then I don't have enough energy to do it, it frustrates me and it really bothers me. Your brain is constantly at war with itself and you don't know why and you don't know how to stop it sometimes, and you just think to yourself like you feel stuck and you don't know what to do. And that's just from my personal experience. I can't speak for everybody else, but that's just how it feels for me. You often hear that if you go seek help that you're weak or soft for going to talk about your emotions. I myself am pretty poor at sharing my feelings and communicating my emotions, which is probably why I've never been in a serious relationship. I've always felt like I've needed to hold my
Yeah, I think he was starting to get real deep when he talked about why he was never in a serious relationship. Because I think we find that a lot with college and pro athletes, or even when they are in a serious relationship or they are married, they step out on their relationships, and a lot of them have said it was due to mental health issues. So we do have a guest today.
Yes, we do. And I just want to comment, I heard the pain in his voice,
Hmm.
the concern that he had talking about his depression and anxiety and how much of a toll that it's taken on him. And I'm glad that he's brave enough, to come out and
Yeah.
talk about it in public too. But he wants to shed some light on it. So we have a colleague of mine in the studios today who has done some research on this particular topic, athletes' mental health and how they're coping with things. We have Dr. Katie Lamberson in the house with us. Welcome to the show. And Katie is an assistant professor at the University of North Georgia in my department, the Department of Counseling. She received her PhD in counselor education from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. While there, she became involved in the Institute to Promote Athlete Health and Wellness, where she served as a counselor for the athletic department, provided trainings on mental health and substance use in athletes, and assisted in research examining wellness needs in athletic populations. Since that time, she has continued her work with athletic populations by providing mental health trainings in other departments of athletics, increasing knowledge of mental health needs, as well as equipping them with skills needed to address these concerns in their athletes. Additionally, Katie volunteers her time as a counselor for the athletic department on her own campus at UNG. In addition to her work with athletes, Katie teaches courses in the counseling department where she serves as the coordinator for the addictions counseling track. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you heard the little clip that we just played from
Malcolm.
Malcolm as he talked about what he's going through with some of his depression and anxiety. What was your first reaction listening to his clip?
It's stuff I've heard before. I've worked with a lot of athletes over the years, and I think it's great that he's willing to talk about it because he's absolutely right. In the culture of athletics, it's not something that is often talked about, these mental health issues. But the reality is, I think that the statistics are somewhere around 30% of college athletes have mood symptoms like depression, and
Oh, wow.
about 50% have anxiety.
I didn't know that.
So it's pretty high, yet that not that many people are talking about it.
Okay. So, with some of your experience working with the athletes, I think at two separate schools now,
Three different schools.
three separate
Oh.
schools now, what do you see as contributing to the anxiety and depression, the mood disorders that they are experiencing? What's contributing to that?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is, especially with the student athletes in particular, they're going through all the same developmental transitions that any college student is going through, being away from home for the first time, being on their own for the first time, trying to balance classes, make new friends, figure all that stuff out. But on top of that, they have these pressures in the athlete world, and their personal pressures, but they're also outside pressures. You see with the athletes who are in big ticket universities with big athletic programs, they feel like they are idols at the school,
Mhm.
and they have to live up to that.
Yep.
And if they don't, then they're letting the whole school down, not just themselves, not just the team, but and it really permeates across a lot of different people in their lives who they feel like they're trying to really set the tone for, and it's hard for them to do that.
So I'm hearing that they can't, well, the college athletes in particular, they can't be the typical kid going to college and having fun and trying to figure their way out in life. They have these extra expectations
Yeah.
placed on them and a lot of pressure from the coaches to perform. And it also sounds like some social pressure, from their peers, that they're supposed to be something that perhaps they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe, other people think they are and they don't believe in it themselves. They have their own doubts in it, like as we all do. We doubt our abilities and the things that we're supposed to be good at, but other people believe in us. And so you're not just letting yourself down, you're letting everybody else down with it.
So I think that's a good point you brought up, letting other people down. We were talking before we started about young athletes, and anyone who knows me, the people who are my friends on Facebook and they're watching this, you all know that I have a young athlete. And I see my friend Sherry is on here also. And we talk a little bit about both our kids are in high school and both of them are the captains of teams. And I often wonder if, in trying to encourage her or us encouraging our children to be the best, do you think that we're adding to their anxiety? Like you're supposed
parents.
to be right. We're supposed to be encouraging. I want to, but I don't want you to just go out there and waste my money either.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes. The answer is yes. I mean, all of these students, and then what happens is it translates oftentimes into their new environment almost takes on the new role of the family. So they get to college, and all of a sudden the coaches become the parents, and the other teammates become the siblings, and it's almost like they're playing out these same sort of family dynamics, trying to make you proud, trying to make the coaches proud. They bring that all with them. They internalize it.
I actually saw that when I was a doc student at Arkansas, University of Arkansas, and my graduate assistantship doing counseling in the counseling center. And because I was the only black counselor there, they invited me to do some counseling with some of the athletes who were primarily black, not all of them. What I realized, many of those athletes, they didn't know how to make decisions on their own. It was like they were kids, and the coach was the parent. And there's this other individual, I forgot the role they were in or the title of the person. They actually went around to make sure that athletes were in their classes. And they also talked.
Yeah, we had that at Auburn.
Yeah, I don't know what they were called, and they would come to
The
me.
faculty athletic rep. Usually every university has one.
Okay,
Oh,
and-
well, no, for us, it was other students who would go and make
Oh,
sure
I see.
that was like their work study position to make sure that
yes.
the athlete was showing up to class and walk them to their next
And yes, they would
class.
walk them to class. You get them out, knock on their dorm room, in an athletic dorm, and take them into their room, the classroom, and make sure they were there. And I was like, gee, they're treating them like they're kids. Like they can't make decisions on their own. As I talked to them, I realized that they had a mom, typically a single mom, raising them, and she made a lot of decisions for them. And now the coach has taken on the same role and making all decisions all the way down to how they should dress. So listening to Asha's comments and questions, about her daughter, I believe she plays volleyball. What do you believe, as we're starting off when they're young, what can parents do to make sure we're not causing any damage to our kids?
Right.
But at the same time, getting them to appreciate sports and being an athlete, because it does bring a certain level of discipline for them.
Yeah,
What kind of role can a parent play?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is research that shows that playing a sport as a young kid, it has protective factors, and it helps you to stay away from drugs and alcohol, and it helps you to, make friends and learn to be part of a team. There's a lot of really good benefits to it. So I think it's probably all about balance, really. I hear a lot of students who come to me because they're in a place where they're struggling, and they'll say, I've forgotten what was fun about the sport for me.
Yeah.
It used to be fun, and I've forgotten that. Now it's more like a job. It's more like pressure. It's not something that I want to be doing. I have to be doing it. And so how do you, as a parent, make sure that the balance is still there of you're taking it seriously, and you're, dedicated, and you're learning the discipline, and also still having fun and recognizing it's not everything. There's other things, because at the end of the day, a majority of these students aren't going to go pro. And if they don't know that reality, then there's a lot of grief and loss that comes around that too. I don't know who I am without this sport. So if your entire identity is wrapped up in that, then it's gone. That can lead to a lot of mental health stuff. Without knowing who you are, you start to feel those depressive symptoms. You start to feel that anxiety, and you're just lost.
So not going pro, I think we kind of beat that almost into their heads now, especially what pro is there for volleyball? We already know.
Well, there's an Olympic team.
Right,
I don't know where they come
with
from.
12 people. You got all these other college volleyball teams, and they're going to pick 12 that are going to be on the Olympic team. So ultimately, I think the goal in high school is to go to college. But even now on the 9th grade team, they just pointed out to each other that on the 9th grade team, there are 12 or 15 people, I can't remember. But then there's JV and there's varsity. And only 4 of the varsity girls are going to graduate, which means 4 from junior varsity go there, and only like 4 of the ninth graders will go up to JV. So about 11 of you all won't be there next year. So you go ahead and prepare yourself now to end your volleyball career before it starts, unless your parents are willing to pay $4,000, $5,000 for club ball in between seasons. That's a whole other subject that we could talk about later on.
So the question I'm wondering, listening to Asha talk about her daughter, I'm still trying to get my daughter to be competitive, but that's another topic right there. What's the line? What's the role of the parent in getting involved in a kid's athletic program and what they're trying to do? As Asha joked about, getting out there, giving instructions and feedback to her daughter, I believe, during the game.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell y'all about that, but we'll talk about that as soon as we come back from this break.
Sorry, I didn't know we were going to.
Welcome back to Two Therapists and a Microphone on the Next 41 Network, controlling the narrative on IBNXradio.com. I'm Dr. Asha Dickerson.
And I'm Dr. Harrison Davis.
And when we left, we were talking about the parents' roles in working with young athletes, or I would say even older athletes, because I think, when you look at the NFL or the NBA, most Now, young men are always shouting at their mom and all the work that she did to
Yep.
get them there to where they are. You know,
Yep.
now they're the breadwinners. They're trying to pull the whole family up. You know, there's a whole HBO series about that, but
Yep.
we'll come back to that. But we were talking about what is the parent's role? Because me, as a parent and of a volleyball player, I have been told that my role is only to cheer, and that even when my daughter messes up, I don't need to say anything to her. That the only thing
Now,
I
are you
need to say,
saying something during the game?
yes.
Oh.
So, so I may say before she serves to calm down because she's so strong. And if she hits another kid in the face with that ball, it totally break their nose. But instead, she'll hit it out. So I'll say, calm down, or don't use all your force. Or she might miss the ball, and I'll say, next time, bend your legs more, or step into the ball instead of diving. And I was told that it's not my job to coach her. It's only my job to cheer,
Okay.
and that they don't come to my job and try to tell me how to do it.
Okay. All right. So Katie, you're the expert on this. What is the role of the parents, with their kids playing sports and trying to provide some of that guidance that we heard Asha talking about? I can see myself doing something similar if my daughter ever gets to the point where she's actually playing a sport. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, personally, I think you got to think about what's your motivation as the parent. Is your motivation about your kid and what your kid's doing and your kid's happiness and your kid learning things? Or is it about living out something for yourself? And when it's about you, you tend to overstep. And so how do you balance supporting your kid and their dreams with also not putting too much pressure? It's a hard thing to do, but as parents, we have to balance that in everything that we do. How do you give enough support but not enable, and it's kind of that same thing. Is that what she's needing from you? If she wants you to be there to I get in my head, Mom, and I need you to remind me, yell these things out, then that's for her. And then to me, that seems appropriate if she's asking for that, if that's what she needs. If she's saying, Mom, I need you to tell me I did a good job even if I didn't, then that's what she needs. If she needs you to not say that because some kids don't want that, then that's what she needs too.
Well, so that's different. She want me to tell her she's doing a good job, even though she's not doing a good job. That's a whole other subject. 'Cause I
Asha
have
is not
an
going to do
issue.
that. She's not going to do that.
I want to be authentic.
But what I heard that really stood out to me when you were just talking is what's the reason the parent is getting so involved, and is it more for them or is it more for the kid? Have you talked to some of those parents who are just doing it more for them?
I haven't, with confidentiality, obviously, I don't have a lot of access to parents in the work that I do with athletes.
Okay.
Because they're
But-
grown in college.
Yeah.
Right? So you
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I
Yeah.
can't really talk to them. So it's really more just speculation after listening to them talk and feeling like, I do know some people that I've worked with that have talked about kind of feeling like it was never a choice. It was always just something that they were going to do. And that, to me, that comes from the parent.
Mm-hmm.
If it's, I want to play a sport and I'm going to try out each one until I figure out which one is the right fit for me, then that's really different than, from the time I could walk, I knew I was going to golf or
Mhm.
Okay.
whatever
Yeah,
it might
I've met
be.
those students.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a great parent then, because I did let her
Of
try.
course you are.
I let her try some other things first, and volleyball was her thing.
Well, I guess I'm trying to figure out that line, and I want my daughter to play a sport, hopefully something she's good at. We haven't found that sport yet. And so I'm spending a lot of energy and time trying to find sports to introduce her to. How do I figure out what's the line, and maybe this may not be best for, or how do I recognize that I'm really doing this for me? I do have some goals for her. I mean, ideally, I would like for her to get involved in the sport, to meet a variety of friends, to become much more disciplined, the team play, and also getting a college scholarship. Those are goals that I have for her. But how do I recognize whether or not I'm doing too much trying to reach that?
I mean, you both are counselors, so at what point do you recognize you're doing more for your clients than they're doing for themselves? I think it's
Yeah, but it's a
Ah,
kid. This is
man.
my child.
I know, right?
I hear that, but I think, and keep in mind, I have a 1-year-old, so I'm not an expert parent by any means, but my husband and I were just talking about this, and I was that kid too. I went through each different thing. I did cheerleading for a year and volleyball for a year and softball for a year, and I never stuck with anything.
Okay.
And for me, my anxiety got in my way. It was so bad that
Okay.
I just really I didn't want to perform in front of other teammates or other people, and so it wasn't a good fit for me. So,
Okay.
at times do I think, well, could my parents have made me stick with something a little bit more? Yes, and also, would that have exacerbated my anxiety to the point of pathology? It could have. So I think in that case, it's kind of, you have to know your own kid. Is it an avoidance thing? Is it I don't want to give up my screen time thing? Or is it a true anxiety, mood kind of thing? And in each case, it's going to look different.
Well, that is helpful to know. And sometimes we forget that we're therapists when we're working with our kids, want the best for. But I like that, just to look out and see how she's reacting to some of the things that I'm pressuring her to do, because I am pressuring her.
Well, and so there's a flip side to that. On one hand, I can help my daughter and correct her in some ways. And on the other hand, there have been times when the coach is like fussing at her and she looks up at me like, my kids know, I can be a little aggressive. And she looks up at me like, are you going to get her? I need you to handle her. Because
Like the
I'm
coach
remaining
crossed the line and she
Right,
wasn't too sure.
And I'll see my child make eye contact and I'll scream out, it's cool. It's 1 point. Calm down. And the coach will look back and I'll make eye contact like, I already know I'm not
So
the
this may
one.
be a conflict between you and the coach.
Well, okay, let's talk about that. Our coach, both of her daughters play as well, and she is their coach. One of her daughters plays for varsity, and the other plays for junior varsity. And in my opinion, when it comes down to it, she has their best interest at heart. So she doesn't care as much about whether or not my child does well and goes to college as she does about her own. I'm not saying she doesn't care anything about my child or the other people's children, but I do think, regardless of what she may say, there is some bias there.
Well, so you're basically saying that you feel like that's your role then, is to provide them that, and in the coach with her own kids, she's doing both. She's coaching and
Right.
parenting, and your daughter needs both also.
Exactly.
So you deserve to have your role as parent in that.
I do. So don't tell me what my role is when you're doing both roles for your kids.
All right. So we talked about pressure on the kids. We're starting off with the kids, and now let's move on to when they're teenagers and going off to college. Tell us about how we can, parents, teachers, recognize, or what is it that the teenagers are going through that may cause some more problems for them later with the depression, anxiety. You talked about feeling anxious when you were a kid and trying out different sports. What are some things that we can look out for, or how does it show itself in some of the teenagers?
Yeah, I think that's hard, and I've actually done some trainings with athletic departments on this, because I think that's part of the issue, is that one, we don't talk about it, but part of the reason we don't talk about it is because we don't know how to, and that we're not trained to. And so if they have some ideas on how to recognize these things, then maybe they're more likely to intervene or to recommend counseling, because it's the same thing with a parent. If a parent encourages a kid to get help, they're likely to do it. And it's the same thing if the coach is taking on the role of the parent. If the coach thinks that I should get help, then maybe I'm more likely to do it. So I think the biggest thing is to look at changes in behavior.
Okay.
That's the biggest thing to notice. If you see a kid who used to be really bubbly and outgoing and all of a sudden they're withdrawn, that would be concerning, or vice versa. A kid who's typically pretty withdrawn and quiet, who's all of a sudden being kind of loud and boisterous, that might be a concern. Changes in eating and sleeping habits would be a big thing too. Are they taking care of themselves in terms of eating right and eating at all? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they putting so much pressure on themselves between sport and academics that they're not getting enough sleep or having time to eat or making time for that?
And it looks like the athletes, the ones I remember from college, they had some brutal schedules.
Yeah.
They were full-time students, and then they had the practice as well, and then they had, I don't know what they call it, tutoring time or study time, and so they had no free time at all during the week, and then there was the weekends with the football, and all of their time is just focused on that.
Yes. Yes.
And being at a big football school, a lot like Auburn,
Mm-hmm.
I got the impression the school was actually there surrounding the athletics.
Yes, regardless of the fact that the team at one point when I was there, they were losing all of their games, but athletics was still the most important
Like
thing.
we were there providing degrees because
Mm-hmm.
of the athletic department.
Yep.
You know, academics was secondary,
Yep.
but it does seem like they have these brutal schedules. Are the athletes prepared for that?
Most of the time, no. You know, it's funny because I've heard this multiple times. They call them student athletes, but the students say sometimes I feel like a student athlete and sometimes I feel like an athlete student. And there's a lot of conflicting messages around that because at those big ticket schools, even in their academic settings, they still are athlete students because the
Yeah.
athletic departments get so much money and they bring
They
in a
do.
lot of
Yes.
revenue
Yeah, they
for
do.
the university.
I saw that.
And at some of the smaller schools, it's like when I'm in class, I'm a student athlete, but when I'm on the court or on the field, I'm an athlete student, and so I don't know which one is correct. I don't know which one I'm supposed to be or which way it goes. And none of that leaves a lot of time for socializing, which we know at that
Yeah.
particular developmental stage is essential. I mean, peer relationships are so important to teenage and early 20s. It's just one of the most important types of relationships to have. So if we're not allowing them that time outside of their team, then they're missing an entire piece of their overall wellness that they're not getting.
How much time do you think that they need outside of their team? Because now I remember some athletes, and they probably found out their time by not going to class, but they socialized plenty.
When their
And that
season
kept-
was over,
You know what? I didn't think about that.
that's
Maybe it
that's
was when
that's
their
what I
season was
learned in
over. Okay.
Arkansas. When football season was over, then those football athletes had more free time. But during the fall, the basketball players, they had a lot of free time too. But when the season started, they didn't have any time at all.
Yeah, and I think some of it too is comparing when they see students who are not athletes and the time that they have, then it doesn't feel like it's fair or enough because they're getting to do all these things that I don't have time for. But I mean, it's true. Their days during the week are pretty well booked. They have NCAA regulations around study hall time that they have
Study
to
hall.
do.
Mhm.
And they have to meet with academic advisors regularly. They have to do work with the athletic trainers. They have to do actual schoolwork. They have to go to their classes. They have practice. They have weights. And then many of them have games and tournaments on the weekends also
Yep.
when
Yep.
they're in season. So it ends up being the entire week.
So I must be honest, that's when I was in Arkansas. That's when I was introduced to big college football and basketball. I went to state universities prior to that time. And a part of me, this other side of me, saw how all the services were provided for the athletes. I mean, they had like babysitters, who make sure they made it to class. Then there was study hall. There were automatic tutors. There were people in
Yeah.
place to go talk to their professors on their behalf. They ate together. They had their own dorm room, and they had scholarship to go to school for free. They gave them free clothes, to wear with the Arkansas and the logo and everything on it, and they get to play this sport, that I am assuming that they enjoy. So a part of me was wondering, what are you so anxious about? What are you so uptight about? Whereas the rest of us, we're struggling and trying to make sure we stay in school, and trying to balance out, different things. But sometimes it was a question whether or not I was going to go back to that school next year because of financial reasons. So there's a side of me. Am I wrong for feeling this way?
Well, so let me add to that because I was an athletic tutor and undergrad, and part of that was also if I was in the class with some athletes, I would have carbon copy paper that I had to take my notes on. They didn't even expect them to take their own notes.
Yes, they have
I
people
need to
taking
take
notes. Yeah.
and give them a copy of the notes that I took from class, and I knew full well that they probably weren't going to read them, but if they did, they were good notes because I was a great student, good enough to be an athletic tutor.
So the question is, with all that information that we've been exposed to, why is it that they're not having a much better time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a clear example of the grass is greener on the other side. The athletes
Okay.
think that it's greener for the non-athlete students and that they don't have the same amount of pressures and time commitments. And then the students who aren't athletes see the preferential treatment that does happen at some universities, not all universities, but it certainly does, especially at some of those bigger ticket schools. And I think a lot of times what it comes down to is one of the reasons why the mental health stuff doesn't get discussed is because there is a preference for people outside of this world to see that population as privileged. And if they're privileged, then they certainly don't need mental health services because they have everything that they need.
I see.
People are giving them resources, they're giving them clothing, they're giving them
Making it easy for them.
scholarships. Absolutely. And so we just assume, and then they get lost.
Yeah.
They get lost in the mental health side of things because we assume that means none of that stuff is hard for them. But the reality is, if they don't play well and they don't keep their academics right, then they lose their scholarship.
Yep.
Then
Yep.
they also wouldn't come back next year.
That's
and
right.
then that's a whole other. If you're the, if you're the star quarterback for, Auburn or Alabama, and you lose your scholarship and you can't afford to come back next year, you're letting down a whole lot of people.
Yeah, you are. And I guess some of it's bias, because I wish I was an athlete. I wish I had the ability, to perform the way they did and get a free scholarship
They
and
didn't
play.
even have to keep the same GPA I had to keep my
Even to
my
get in,
scholarship.
they didn't
Oh,
need
yeah.
the GPA that I had to earn to get into school. And I would love to make millions of dollars playing a sport, playing a game. But I guess I am looking at it from the outside as it looks very glamorous,
There's a cost.
Yeah, there's a cost to it, and that's what I'd learned talking to some of those athletes back at Arkansas when I was really assuming when I was approached, by the coaches to talk to some of their guys. I'm like, sure, no problem. I'm not a sports psychologist, but what I really learned is that they were like little kids, and they were very anxious, and they were depressed, and they were lonely, and they didn't like having all that pressure on them. And they used to say things like, "I just want to be normal." And I saw the toll that it was taking on them. What do you do to help some of those athletes?
It's funny because I had the same experience, and that's how I actually got started with this, because I was hired to meet with the students when they were sanctioned for an alcohol violation.
Okay.
So they were coming to me as a punishment. And in this punishment for drinking alcohol or using drugs when they weren't supposed to, all of what you're saying was coming out, all of this anxieties, all of these pressures, everything just comes stumbling out. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, these students are going through way more than I ever knew.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I fell into the work. But I think for me, it depends, because some of the students come to me because someone told them to, and some of them come to me because they want to. And there's a difference, I think, in how you handle that, because the ones who come because they've been told to sometimes are just there to fulfill the requirement, and it's a little bit harder to break through. And so for those students, I tend to focus more on the sport. That's what they want to focus on.
Okay.
Performance. How do I, keep my mental head in the game, those kinds of things. For the other students, the ones who are there for their own accord, they know they have things that they need to work through. Oftentimes the sport is more of a metaphor for their life, and so I focus on that outside of their life stuff, and I think it's nice for them to have that outlet, to feel like this isn't all about how good I'm doing on the field or on the court.
Okay, so when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the pro athletes that have been in the media lately. Keep listening on the next 411 network. Two therapists in the microphone.
To quit saying. strike. Train for the mission, so believe the hype and sweat it. Cause you're gonna regret it. The day that you dissed us, you wish you never met us. You remind me of a real short story. One hit record and you start to bore me. Get ready, cause this is it. Your crew is through, and we too legit to quit shining. We crush the strong and percolate the weak. Daily, we make our moves to improve our groove because we love to rule what we play. Yo, work and play. We started at the bottom, now we lead the way. And yay, I'm having a fit. Kicking it at the top because I'm too legit to quit shining.
And that was too legit to quit because Harrison chose it.
That's right. That's my song. That's my song right there.
Makes you
But
think about football, though, doesn't it?
It does.
And sports. They play. I feel like they play that a lot during breaks.
absolutely. So you guys are listening to Two Therapists and a Microphone. I am Dr. Harrison Davis.
And I'm Dr. Asha Dickerson.
And today we're talking about athletes and mental health, and we're talking to Dr. Katie Lamberson, and we're talking about athletes and their mental health. And I want to bring up a former client of mine that I had about 2 or 3 years ago. He's an adult male, but he played professional football for a big ACC college, and he talked about how he was on campus feeling suicidal and depressed. He didn't use those words, but he described the symptoms, and he went to his coaches because that's what they're supposed to do whenever anything's affecting their game. And what I was surprised about was that how they minimized how he was feeling. It got to the point where he didn't show up for practice a couple of times, and he realized how valuable he was to the university, and that maybe they were only interested in him winning games, you know, because that brings in a lot of money. But at the same time, his self-worth was real low, and he wasn't used to being away from his family, you know, because his mom in particular told him to do everything. He wasn't getting along with the coach. He wasn't making any friends. And so he was having a horrible time, and it was contributing to his depression. How would you help an athlete like that? Because I can imagine a lot of them may be feeling that way.
Yeah, I think that's very common because, like we said, I think there's one side of it is there are these messages of like mental toughness and
Yep.
not showing weakness
Yep.
in the athletic world. And on the other hand, there are people who are not trained to know that this is a bigger issue, and so they may minimize it, they may downplay it. I think that the best thing to do in those cases, one, is to normalize and to just validate the way that he's feeling. Because if he's not getting that other places, if the coaches are telling him, no, you shouldn't feel this way, you're getting a lot, you're well respected on this campus, people
Work
love
it out
you.
on the field is what he was told.
Exactly. Yeah, work it out on the field. If that's not working for you, then it's nice to have somebody who can kind of help you to feel the way you actually feel and be okay with feeling the way you actually feel. And then also giving some skills in terms of the mental stuff, because what tends to happen is when those thoughts start to reel in their minds on the field, then it's hard to really be present and play to your full potential, because all of a sudden now you're focusing on those self-doubts that start to come in. So giving some skills to kind of reframe those thoughts when they come in, helping with some mindfulness techniques to help stay present when you are playing, but then to still get the support outside of that so that you can find the balance and still maybe find some joy in what you're doing on the field.
Okay, thank you. So we had a few somewhat famous, well, not somewhat famous, they're very famous to somewhat famous to me because I don't watch sports like that. But there are some athletes who have been talking a lot recently about their mental health issues, not playing for the NFL anymore. I can't remember his name. What's his name?
Andrew Luck?
Is that his name? I'm going to trust you.
Oh, the one recently who retired from
Yes,
Indianapolis Colts, the quarterback.
Okay, I didn't know he retired. I just thought he quit. You're into NFL stuff. I'm not. But people from the video I saw booed him.
Yeah, they did.
Walked off.
So Andrew Luck, and you can add to this if you know more about it. He announced, he's a millionaire playing football quarterback for the Colts, but he announced right during preseason time that he was retiring because he was physically and mentally exhausted, and he said that he was mentally worn down, and he made statements about how he wanted to ensure the rest of his life he was living at a certain quality of life. And when he was out there on the field during a preseason game, some of the fans for the Colts booed him. I believe, I'm not quite sure, I'm speculating, because they thought he was letting them down.
Okay.
And he decided to put himself as a first priority, over the sport and the impact of getting hit so much. But he obviously felt like he wasn't ready for the season.
Yeah. Well, I think that, obviously I've not talked to Andrew Luck. I would love to, but I think to me that is absolutely an example of probably why he's feeling the way he's feeling, to have people boo him for that. Because in any other circumstance in your own life, if your partner is saying, this job is wearing me down, it's not healthy for me, I'm not taking care of myself anymore, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed, you would support them in finding something different and doing something different. And yet it mattered so much to these fans to win games, to have him play, that those same thoughts weren't occurring to them, that he was having the exact same experience that somebody in a job that's unhealthy for them or toxic for them might be feeling. And so that's absolutely an example of those pressures that he's feeling, and how he can't take care of his own mental issues because other people don't want him to, because he's letting other people down.
Yeah. And can you imagine if he had like a broken leg? And this is the second time he's broken the leg, and he's announcing that he's retiring. Would those fans boo him?
Exactly. What's the difference?
Yeah, forget broken leg. Think about all these head injuries,
Concussions.
These high impact sports. I remember when there was the research that came out that said that the head injuries led to
encephalitis.
Is that what it was?
Or brain injuries for sure.
Something, but I remember that Roddy White posted on Twitter that he doesn't care what happens because of his head injuries, it would be worth it, or something he posted on Twitter that they made him take down shortly after. And I think it's sad that a lot of the athletes like have that mentality. If I
Absolutely.
die at 50 because I've been hit in the head 1,000 times, it doesn't matter. I got to play for the NFL, and my family is rich from now on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you brought that up because actually we're Redskins fans, and we were at the game last year when Alex Smith broke his leg. And the level of respect in the stadium from the fans and the other team's fans for him when he got carted off the field, and that's so opposite from being booed off the field for the same thing. I need to take care of myself because I broke my leg versus I need to take
So
care
there's
of
respect
myself.
when athlete is injured physically
Yeah.
and it has to leave the game. But if you're leaving the game because of a mental or emotional issue, it means that you're not tough enough. You know, you
Yeah,
can't stick
weak-
it out.
Weak
Right.
man or
If I
woman.
can't see the bone sticking out of your leg, then you obviously are okay to play.
Right.
But if you're having panic attacks, you know, or you're experiencing some depression, that's another story. Because Kevin Love, the NBA player for, I believe, Cleveland Cavaliers, yeah. So now he has obviously become the mental health spokesperson for the NBA, and he's talked about his depression, anxiety, and having panic attacks. So I can imagine he's under some pressure too.
Yeah, I think that's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I love that there's some advocacy out there from somebody in that world because we're going to start listening to it more if these respected people are talking about it. And on the other hand, is that going to add to his pressure now that he's the face of mental health in the
Oh,
athletic
I didn't
world?
think about it that way.
That's a huge responsibility, especially in the culture that I've seen in the athletic world, which is we don't talk about this. So it's a big wall to break down. That's a lot of extra pressure on somebody who's already dealing with panic attacks, depression, anxiety.
All right. Well, I think we have learned a lot today. I have. You know, I'll kind of step back a little bit as a parent and remember that I'm not an athlete and I'm not a coach. So I'll do my job with just to cheer. Why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you?
Sure, they're welcome to email me at katie.lamberson@ung.edu.
Okay, thank you. So we will be back in 2 weeks on Two Therapists in the Microphone talking about those comments that Fantasia made and what our roles are as black women in our relationships. Should we
And
be
who
so-
should lead?
Right.
So you guys have been listening to Two Therapists in a Microphone. I'm glad you can join us as we talk to Dr. Katie Lamberson about mental health and athletes. We will see you guys next time.
Us out at www.2therapists, that's TWO therapists with an S.com, or link up with us on Facebook. Just search for Two Therapists.
And I'm Dr. Harrison Davis,
I'm Dr. Asha Dickerson.
and we will see you guys next time.